Phenomenal.
You watch The Crown and I don't? That's shocking.
I love your complexity.
Take a look at this. Oh, I'm deep. I'm going being tall. But take a look at this. A 6-year-old watching his favorite wrestler, John Cena, get chokeslammed by Kane. This is the best part of being a wrestler, when the fans believe magic. And just look at this. Where is he? Where is he? There he is. John, if you see this, you should probably, send him a T-shirt or something. It looks like he already has a starter set. But this is something I do all the time, too, when I'm in the ring. You find somebody and you point him out, and if I'm a bad guy that night, I'll stare at him and tear him up, whatever. But the best part about this, John Cena's sad, and
Such a DVR's never missed an episode of The Fight. Hi, Bret.
Hi, Kimberly. Thank you. This is a Fox News alert. I'm Bret Baier in Washington. We have major breaking news on several fronts tonight. President Trump is not the target of the investigation of longtime personal attorney Michael Cohen. We're learning tonight the president has received that assurance from the Deputy Attorney General. And the Trump Eagle team has grown by one. Former New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani is now on board. Let's get the latest from Chief White House Correspondent John Roberts, traveling with the president in West Palm Beach, Florida. Good evening, John.
Brett, good evening to you. Some fast-moving developments this afternoon. First, sources close to the investigation tell Fox News that last week, in an Oval Office meeting with a number of principals, including the president, Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General told the president that he is not a target of the Michael Cohen investigation, that Cohen is the only target of that investigation. You'll remember a week ago Monday, Cohen's office, his home, and his hotel room were raided, and the FBI coming in and taking virtually everything that was in there. And in subsequent court documents, we find out that Cohen had 3 clients, the major one of which was the president. But Rod Rosenstein telling the president he is not a target, which raises a question: how does he know that, for it to be a fact, if prosecutors have not had an opportunity to look at the materials that were seized in Cohen's home because they have been tied up in litigation, the president and Cohen wanting to have a special master look at those documents to find out which ones are subject to attorney-client privilege. Then there is the revelation this afternoon that Rudy Giuliani is joining the team. In a statement, the president saying, "Rudy is great. He has been my friend for a long time and wants to get this matter quickly resolved for the good of the country." And back just a second again to the assurance from Rod Rosenstein that the president was not a target of the Cohen investigation. Should information arise where the president does become a target of that investigation, that could be problematic for the investigation, because here you have the Deputy Attorney General saying he's not a target. And then suddenly he becomes a target, and again, there were some very prominent people in that room. All of this on what was yet another busy day for the White House that began with a trip to the Florida Keys. President Trump had border security on his mind today, jetting off to Key West this morning, ground zero in the East Coast battle against drugs and human trafficking.
Thinking about drugs and stopping these drugs and other things, human trafficking, so many other forms of trafficking.
President Trump also had his sights trained on America's West Coast, with some choice words for California's governor, who agreed to send National Guard troops to the border, but not to assist in immigration control. President Trump tweeting, Governor Jerry Brown announced he will deploy up to 400 National Guard troops to do nothing. The crime rate in California is high enough, and the federal government will not be paying for Governor Brown's charade. We need border security and action, not words. And the president praising San Diego County for joining the federal lawsuit against sanctuary cities, tweeting today, California's dangerous policies release violent criminals back into our communities, putting all Americans at risk. President Trump hopes to address another critical security issue, North Korea's nuclear program, in a planned summit with Kim Jong-un. In a news conference with Japan's Prime Minister, the president said he's prepared to walk if Kim isn't serious about denuclearization.
If I think that it's a meeting that is not going to be fruitful, we're not going to go. If the meeting, when I'm there, is not fruitful, I will respectfully leave the meeting.
Today, another positive sign. South Korea announcing that Kim has dropped his demands that U.S. troops vacate the Korean peninsula as a condition for dismantling his nuclear program. And the White House continues to work on a location for the meeting. Fox News is told that among the possible sites are Singapore, Sweden, and Switzerland. Less likely, but still under consideration, is Vietnam. As President Trump works on a North Korean breakthrough, relations with Russia took another hit. Russia today demanding compensation for tariffs on steel and aluminum. Russia claims the tariffs are safeguard measures designed to protect U.S. companies and not, as President Trump has claimed, a matter of national security. And despite a Sunday claim by Ambassador Nikki Haley that more sanctions against Russia were imminent, President Trump said at Mar-a-Lago, nothing is planned, at least not right now.
We'll do sanctions as soon as they very much deserve it. We will have, that is a question. There's been nobody tougher on Russia than President Donald Trump.
The president was asked about it yesterday, but did not respond on what was responsible for the disconnect between what he was thinking about Russian sanctions and what the United Nations ambassador said on Sunday morning. But the White House felt compelled on Sunday to put in a call to the Russian ambassador in Washington, D.C. and say, we're not planning any sanctions, at least not right now. Bret?
More on that a bit later. John Roberts in West Palm Beach. John, thanks. The former #2 at the FBI, who was recently terminated just hours before retirement, is now facing potentially serious legal trouble. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge has the latest on that tonight. Good evening, Catherine.
Well, thank you, Bret. A source close to the matter confirms to Fox News that the Justice Department's internal watchdog, Inspector General Michael E. Horowitz, made a criminal referral to the U.S. attorney here in Washington, D.C. Horowitz and his team concluded former Deputy FBI Director Andrew McCabe lied 4 times, 3 times under oath over his role in a media leak about the FBI's investigation of the Clinton Foundation about 2 weeks before the presidential election. Key section of the Inspector General's report mirrors the language contained in the federal statute 18 U.S.C. 1001 that covers lying to federal investigators. It reads in part, when McCabe told investigators in May 2017 that he did not know who authorized the disclosure to the Wall Street Journal, it was not due to a lack of memory. In our view, the evidence is substantial, that it was done knowingly and intentionally. On his book tour today, Director Comey said he had no knowledge of the referral.
Given that the IG's report reflects interactions that Andy McCabe had with me and other FBI senior executives, I could well be a witness.
Criminal referrals are usually secret, and today the Justice Department and the Office of the Inspector General declined to comment. But McCabe's lawyer told Fox News the standard is low in his opinion for this type of referral. We are confident that unless there is inappropriate pressure from high levels of the administration, the U.S. Attorney's Office will conclude that it should decline to prosecute. In a separate development, 2 congressional sources told Fox News the 7 Comey memos memorializing his conversations with President Trump could be delivered to Capitol Hill by the Justice Department as soon as tonight, after Fox News confirmed the Republican chairman of the House Judiciary Committee threatened to issue a subpoena after the Justice Department missed that deadline, Bret.
Catherine, thank you. The Republican chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee says he will continue to work on a bipartisan bill to protect the job of special counsel Robert Mueller, even though the majority leader has vowed not to bring the bill up to the floor for a vote. Judiciary Chairman Chuck Grassley says Mitch McConnell's position against the measure will not affect what happens in his committee. Tonight we take you to the Syria border with Turkey, and you'll hear from a man who says he was injured in that recent chemical attack in Syria. Correspondent Benjamin Hall tells us international inspectors are still not being given access to Ground Zero.
For the 4th day in a row, chemical weapons inspectors failed to reach Douma, the site of the alleged chemical weapons attack.
Russian officials have worked with the Syrian regime, we believe, to sanitize the locations of those suspected attacks and remove incriminating evidence of chemical weapons use.
The Syrian regime has claimed that rebel gunfire kept the inspectors back. But Fox has learned that all rebels had been bussed out of the area 10 days ago as part of a Russian deal. Today, hundreds more rebels gave up their weapons elsewhere in the city, afraid of further gas attacks. Fox has also learned that the bodies of those who died in the attack have been taken from their graves by the regime, and doctors who treated the victims have been detained and threatened if they give evidence.
Doctors are scared that their families who stayed in the in town or live in the government areas supplies will be under threat from the government.
Despite these attempts, though, the truth is emerging. Bit by bit, we're able to paint a picture of what exactly happened in that terrible chemical attack in Duma. We can't get to the site ourselves, but every day, evidence and witnesses come across this border wall with more horrific details. Fox News spoke to someone who claims to be a survivor of the chemical attack.
What I saw were hundreds of injured bodies lying in the corridors, some dying of gas, others by conventional weapons. Many faces were discolored, all red and blue. White foam came out of their mouths and noses.
But despite the strong US-led military response, the Pentagon has acknowledged that stockpiles remain.
They will have the ability to conduct limited attacks in the future. As they contemplate the dynamics of conducting those attacks, they've got to look over their shoulder and be worried that we're looking at them and we'll have the ability to strike them again.
Syrian rebel leaders have shown gratitude for the strikes, but said they hoped the US would do more.
We ask that the President looks at the region again, because there is an enemy growing strong here, that is the alliance of Iran and Russia.
But I've spoken to rebel commanders in the north of Syria today who tell me that Americans have been there and have taken blood and urine samples from survivors of the chemical attack. And that means that while the UN and the OPCW may not have samples, the American government does. Bret?
Benjamin Hall along the border with Syria. Benjamin, thank you. Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin back here in the U.S. is trying to clarify the administration's intentions regarding future sanctions against Russia. As referenced by John Roberts earlier this week, U.S. Ambassador to the UN Nikki Haley and the president's top economic advisor were not on the same page regarding the White House plan and how in the loop Haley was on sanctions policy. Now, the Treasury Secretary weighed in with Liz Clayman today.
We refined the strategy after Nikki made that announcement between Sunday and Saturday and Sunday and Monday. We refined the strategy, and we will continue to refine the strategy. We're not afraid to use these tools. We will use these tools, but we're not going to broadcast to the world our exact thinking on this.
Went on to say she was not hanging in the wind. Last night, President Trump asserted that no one has been tougher on Russia than he has. It will soon be easier for U.S. defense contractors to sell armed drones and other conventional weapons to foreign governments. The administration is removing restrictions that barred American manufacturers from directly marketing and selling drones. However, the U.S. government must still approve those sales, and they will be subject to congressional review. Cuba has a new president tonight, and for the first time in 6 decades, his name is not Castro. But as correspondent Steve Harrigan tells us from Havana, little else is changing.
Miguel Diaz-Canel received 603 out of 604 votes for president in Cuba's National Assembly, or 99.8%. He was the sole candidate. He is the first non-Castro to rule Cuba in 60 years and is 30 years younger than the man he replaces. But Cuban officials have taken pains to stress that nothing would change and that Raul Castro will remain head of the Communist Party.
The mandate given by the people to this legislator is to give continuity to the Cuban Revolution in a crucial historic moment.
Critics of the communist regime agreed nothing had changed and that the long-awaited departure of the Castros was no cause for celebration.
This has been a charade. This has been a farce. This has been smoke and mirrors. Nothing more than rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. And we know what happened to the Titanic. This did not end well. And that's what's happening with this restructuring of the Cuban government.
Relations with the U.S. have soured after alleged sonic attacks against 24 American diplomats. The U.S. Embassy has slashed its staff by 2/3. The new president faces several immediate challenges. The state-controlled economy produces less sugar, fish, and tobacco than before the 1959 revolution. It pays government workers an average of just $30 a month. Through a combination of ruthlessness and charisma, Fidel and Raul hung on to power for 60 years in a one-party state. Now the survival of that system will be tested in a new generation. Bret?
Steve Harrigan in Havana. Steve, thanks. The number of prescriptions filled for opioid painkillers appears to be going down in the U.S. and fast. A health data firm says orders filled dropped 9% across the U.S. last year. That's the biggest fall off in a quarter century. About half of U.S. states have enacted restrictions on opioids since the number of deaths and overdoses has skyrocketed in recent years. Lance Armstrong has reached a $5 million settlement with the federal government in a whistleblower lawsuit stemming from the cyclist's admission of using steroids and other performance-enhancing drugs and methods. For years, Armstrong denied those allegations. A former cycling teammate filed the original lawsuit against him in 2010. The government later joined in. The 7-time Tour de France champion rode for a team sponsored by the U.S. Postal Service. Authorities say a Delta Airlines jet that departed from Atlanta's airport for London had to turn around after smoke was reported coming from an engine. That plane returned safely to Atlanta last night. An airport spokesman says there were no injuries. Regulators are expected to order inspections on engine fan blades, like the one that snapped off that Southwest Airlines plane Tuesday. A woman on board that flight died despite heroic efforts to try to save her.
God put people on that plane for a reason. Everybody acted, and everybody stood strong. Finally made it to the ground, I guess. Just thankful.
Last year, Southwest sought more time to inspect fan blades after regulators proposed making the inspections mandatory. Up next, California communities fight back against the state's sanctuary policy. We'll tell you about one of the big reasons for that. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. Fox 51 in Gainesville, Florida, where 2 Gilchrist County Sheriff's deputies were shot and killed at a restaurant in Trenton when a suspect walked up to the business and fired through the window. Attorney General Pam Bondi in Florida called that attack senseless, and she offered condolences and prayers to the families. The alleged gunman is reported to be dead, and the sheriff's office says no suspects are at large. Fox 29 in Philadelphia as the police commissioner apologizes to 2 black men who were arrested at a Starbucks last week. Commissioner Richard Ross had previously defended police for their handling of that incident. Ross, who is black, says the issue of race is not lost on him, and he should not be the person making things worse. And this is a live look at Denver from our affiliate Fox 31. One of the big stories there tonight, survivors of February's Florida school shooting come to Colorado for tomorrow's 19th anniversary of the Columbine massacre. More than 60 survivors from Parkland High School will attend a private meeting with Columbine survivors along with a rally and then a vigil. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Report. We'll be right back. We told you earlier this week the roster of communities opposing California's sanctuary state policy continues to grow. One of the major factors driving the public pushback against the status, the proliferation of dangerous gang activity. National correspondent William Lachenaz tells us about it tonight from Los Angeles.
Personally, ask you, don't let MS-13 slide.
That message from Washington, accepted by some sheriffs, is rejected by others. New data from the Homeland Security Department shows sanctuary cities released 142 gang members across America, despite deportation orders from ICE. 2/3 of the group, which include criminal aliens from the violent MS-13 gang, were released in California by sheriffs in Los Angeles, Santa Clara, and Orange counties. Orange County and nearly a dozen communities within it are fighting back, joining a federal lawsuit against the statute prohibiting police from communicating with ICE on gang members and other criminal aliens.
I see a conflict between 2 governing documents, the Constitution of the United States and the state constitution itself.
One city, Los Alamitos, went a step further, exempting itself from the sanctuary statute, also known as the Values Act. The ACLU promptly filed suit.
The city's actions are clearly unlawful. The Values Act is an important state law that upholds the great California values of diversity and inclusion.
They're human beings. They have families. It's very important that they be integrated in a humane, intelligent way.
But the communities opposing Brown make a distinction between criminal immigrants and those benefiting society.
On Governor Brown's SB 54, between 1 and 3 inmates walk away freely each and every day in San Diego.
While the administration is finding support in California, with San Diego County voting to join its fight, earlier today, a federal appeals court in Chicago upheld a nationwide injunction against the administration's effort to punish sanctuary cities by withholding federal funds. Bret?
William, thank you. Now to an issue of not so free speech in a place that's supposed to be all about free speech, academia. And it's playing out right now in the state of Wisconsin. Correspondent Matt Finn tells us a 3-year battle began with a rather simple conversation between an upset student and his instructor.
In 2014, at the Catholic Jesuit Marquette University, an unidentified male student approached student teacher Cheryl Abate after a philosophy class she just instructed. The student told Abate he was upset because during the class she dismissed a fair and broader conversation about gay marriage because he claimed she personally believes in it. Fox News listened to a portion of the recording in which Abate tells the student that some of his views not in favor of gay marriage are homophobic and might upset some people in her class. The student eventually gave a copy of that recording to Associate Professor John McAdams. McAdams then wrote a piece about it on his blog, calling Abate a totalitarian, and that groups not favored by leftist professors, of course, can be freely attacked. McAdams also posted a link to one of Abate's essays, which links to contact information on her public webpage. Afterward, Abate received threatening messages, some wishing death on her. She eventually dropped her graduate studies and left Marquette, testifying to a school committee. The emails that I was getting were very frightening. A few people took the time to mail me physical letters to my campus mailbox was even more frightening. I didn't know who these people were, what they were capable of. Marquette University suspended McAdams on the grounds that he violated professional duties by posting her contact information.
It has nothing to do with views. It has to do with painting a target on her back and exposing her to a hostile audience.
In a letter, the Marquette president wrote to McAdams that he could return provided that he apologized and that he admit he acted recklessly.
I was supposed to apologize to Abate for the harm I'd caused her. But no, I was not going to do that because what I engaged in was straightforward journalism. And if the idiots who wrote her had felt like apologizing, that would have been excellent.
If the state Supreme Court here in Wisconsin rules in favor of McAdams, he'll likely become a professor again and he could seek damages. If the court rules in favor of Marquette, it's likely McAdams will never be a professor there again. And there's also the possibility this case could be sent back to the circuit court for trial. Bret?
Matt, thank you. We'll follow this case. Up next, an update on another trial. This trial over a huge telecom merger that could have some major effects on you and your family. We'll explain. First, beyond our borders tonight. The power is back on tonight in most of Puerto Rico. The island experiencing a massive blackout yesterday caused by an excavator hitting a transmission line. But tens of thousands of families still remain without normal service 7 months after Hurricanes Maria and Irma. Another big cultural change in Saudi Arabia. The Hollywood blockbuster Black Panther premiered last night in the kingdom's first movie theater. Public movie screenings were banned in the 1980s. The policy change is part of sweeping social reforms in the kingdom, such as allowing women to drive. A 19-year-old Syrian asylum seeker turned himself into police today after his violent attack on a man wearing a Jewish skull cap in Berlin caused outrage across Germany. The 21-year-old victim, an Arab Israeli, caught Tuesday's assault on video. The victim said he is not Jewish but wore the skull cap as an experiment because he didn't believe it was dangerous to wear one in public in Germany. It quickly went viral and reopened a debate about anti-Semitism in that country. Just some of the other stories beyond our borders tonight. We'll be right back. Looking at the markets today, stocks were off. The Dow lost 83. The S&P 500 was down 16. The Nasdaq dropped 57. The head men at Time Warner and AT&T are defending their company's planned mega merger. Deirdre Bolton of Fox Business Network joins us from New York with the latest on a move that could affect the way you and your family get entertainment. A big case. Good evening, Deirdre.
Good evening, Bret. Well, this 5-week trial is drawing to the end, and top execs, they're taking the stand, they're making their case. So you had the chief executive of Time Warner, that's Jeff Bewkes, yesterday vigorously defending his company's merger with AT&T, saying this deal is necessary to confront tectonic changes in entertainment. AT&T's chief exec, Randall Stevenson, he spoke today. he bolstered this underdog argument. So both say that AT&T and Time Warner must combine so that they both survive. They both spoke about the power of Silicon Valley giants such as Netflix, Amazon, Apple, and Alphabet Google. Now, some analysts agree that AT&T Time Warner combo makes sense. Netflix and Amazon easily reach hundreds of millions of users directly. Each have a lot of cash to spend. Netflix is spending between $7 and $8 billion on original content this year. Amazon about $5 billion at the very least. So the Justice Department and several consumer groups, they disagree with the logic. They see the deal would hurt consumers. So their argument, the government's argument, is that consumers would have to pay bigger bills if the merger goes through as a result of higher prices for Time Warner programs. So both Time Warner and AT&T say that's not true. It wouldn't happen that way, and they say it's unusual for the federal government to step in and block a merger of companies that don't directly compete with one another. Bukes and Stevenson, they have previously suggested that the Justice Department was swayed to block the deal by presidential politics. During his election campaign, you may remember President Trump said the deal should be denied. He has repeatedly bashed CNN for its coverage of his administration. The Justice Department denies political interference. But one thing is clear, investors are watching this trial closely for its implications on antitrust policies and for clues as to how the decision will shape the entertainment landscape. So this is a developing plot line. It's legacy media and telecom versus Silicon Valley upstarts. Bret,
that's one to watch. One to watch.
Indeed.
Deirdre, thank you.
Sure.
Tonight, we continue our reporting and our series about the future of the family farm. This evening, correspondent Doug McKelway on the struggle to preserve not just a livelihood, but a way of life.
This hay ain't gonna be too long before we gotta cut it. It's high as Will's cowboy boots now.
A springtime delivery for Virginia's Wilmot Farms. This planter puts 16 rows of seed into the ground, an upgrade from the last one that seeded 12. Every little bit helps to stretch razor-thin profit margins for this 100-year-old family business.
I'm fourth in line, and I hope that my son will be fifth, or my daughter, either one or both. I don't know that they will.
If you think about the complexity of the equipment, which often costs more than everything else a farmer might own, including the land itself, the unpredictability of the seed stock and the weather, so many things can go wrong.
The numbers are startling. According to the chairman of the House Agriculture Committee, over 12,000 U.S. farms went out of business in 2017. Net farm incomes have dropped 52% in the last 5 years. Bankruptcies are up 33% in the past 2 years.
And not long ago, two key universities informed us that 2/3 of the representative farms that they use to model economic conditions of agriculture are currently marginal or poor financial condition.
Worse yet, uncertainty of crops and profits, coupled with the social isolation of farming, contributes to the highest suicide rate of any U.S. occupation.
Even if they're very productive farmers, things just start to escalate to having cycles of anxiety and stress and depression.
The new Farm Bill, just passed out of the House Agriculture Committee yesterday, addresses many of these concerns, expanding access to credit and loans and expanding crop insurance to include private sector innovations. One amendment, the Stress Act, would provide counseling to distraught farmers. W.P. Johnson is willing to accept all those stresses for the life he's chosen.
As much blood, sweat, and tears that I've put on this place, it had a hell of a hard time to get me away from it. I really do enjoy what we do here. I'm proud of it, but it's a tough life.
It's not all gloom and doom. Frustration with city life and the movement towards organic and locally grown foods is sparking a renaissance of young farmers using the internet to market their products and make a profit. More on that tomorrow. Bret?
Part 3 tomorrow. Doug, thank you. Senator Tammy Duckworth and daughter My Lee have made Senate history. The Illinois Democrat brought her newborn in the pink hat there onto the Senate floor today under new rules that permit that. Duckworth already is the only senator to have given birth while serving in the U.S. Senate. My Lee is the first senator's baby to be allowed on the chamber floor.
It meant so much to be able to cast the vote as a new mom and be able to do my job and take care of my baby at the same time.
The history was made under a new rule passed a day earlier that permitted newborns of senators on the floor during votes. When we come back, the panel on the criminal referral against the former FBI deputy director and President Trump getting some reassurance from the Justice Department's number 2. We'll look at all of that with the panel next.
But how do you feel about your former deputy, according to the Inspector General, lying to you, lying to investigators?
Yeah, conflicted. I like him very much as a person, but sometimes even good people do things they shouldn't do. I've read the report. I think it is accountability mechanisms working, and they should work, because it's not acceptable in the FBI or the Justice Department for people to lack candor. It's something we take really seriously. Given that the IG's report reflects interactions that Andy McCabe had with me and other FBI senior executives, I could well be a witness.
I don't know if you noticed, but Jim Comey's out doing interviews on his book. And this one dealt with news today about Andrew McCabe. A referral from the Inspector General at the DOJ, Michael Horowitz, to the U.S. Attorney here in Washington, saying that the former Deputy FBI Director, Andrew McCabe, lied 4 times, 3 times under oath, over his role in the media leak about the FBI's investigation of the Clinton Foundation 2 weeks before the presidential election. But the lying part is the illegal part, and it has been referred. The McCabe team doesn't think it's going to be moved on, thinks it's a low chance, and Congress weighing in on that.
The thing that bothers Americans so much, and certainly bothers the president, bothers me, is the double standard. I mean, Mike Flynn, while not under oath, makes a false statement to the FBI and gets indicted. Andy McCabe lies 4 times to the FBI, twice under oath to Michael Horowitz, and nothing happens to him. That's the kind of stuff that drives Americans crazy.
A lot of developments today. We'll bring in the panel now. Fox News senior judicial analyst, Judge Andrew Napolitano. Katie Pavlich, news editor at townhall.com, and Charles Lane, opinion writer for The Washington Post. Let's start with McCabe, what Comey said there, and the fact that this is a referral on this that we're told happened actually weeks ago by the IG. Judge.
This is not a political referral. This is not a chairman of a House or Senate committee by virtue of support of the majority saying we think you should look at this. This is a very serious investigation that has concluded. Mike Horowitz was appointed by President Obama and reappointed by President George W. Bush. Think of his office as internal affairs in a police department, a mini DOJ within the DOJ to examine the DOJ. He doesn't look for crimes. He looks for violations of DOJ internal policy. He finds very serious crimes. The argument that was just made by Congressman Jim Jordan will resonate with the American people. If you are going to indict people for lying to FBI agents, why are you not going to indict the number 2 person in the FBI for lying to other FBI agents? And there's really no answer to that if he is not criminally charged.
Katie.
Well, lying to the FBI is a felony, and according to the Inspector General, that's exactly what Andrew McCabe did under oath. And the reason why the FBI takes lack of candor so seriously is because they expect witnesses in cases that they are interviewing to be honest with the FBI agents, and they cannot have a different standard for people at the top of the food chain. And the fact that Andrew McCabe also lied to the #1 guy in the FBI, James Comey, says a lot. Politics got Andrew McCabe into the situation of leaking the information to the Wall Street Journal, of misleading the FBI director, of lying to investigators repeatedly under oath, and it's going to get him in even more trouble. If you listen to the response that his attorney gave about the referral to the U.S. Attorney in Washington, D.C., he says the only reason why he would be prosecuted is if President Trump pressures the U.S. Attorney into doing so. It isn't talking about evidence at all. Now, we don't know what the evidence is, but the U.S. Attorney certainly will be looking at that, and there may be serious consequences legally for him.
I mean, after reading that IG report on this McCabe issue and then now hearing about this referral, the coverage leading up to the McCabe firing really takes a different look, a different perspective. I want to turn now to Rod Rosenstein, who we've confirmed told the president that he is not a target of the Cohen investigation. That's the one with the U.S. Attorney in the Southern District of New York, of the personal attorney Michael Cohen. What about that? Obviously, you cannot be a target and you're a subject, but tomorrow you could be a target if they find something criminal.
There's a lot I don't understand about that. The whole point of the search of the Cohen offices was there might be a crime or fraud going on in that office. It's the only exception you can make to the attorney-client privilege. But how could it be a crime or a fraud that only involves Cohen and that had somehow come across Mueller's desk, and Mueller is investigating the president?
He's referring it to the Southern District.
And so there's a lot that's funny about that. Now, Rosenstein has kind of stuck his neck out by reassuring the president in this way, and somebody may come back and question his judgment in doing that. Can I just add one quick thing on the Comey-McCabe business? You know, the IG says McCabe is lying. McCabe says he's telling the truth, and Comey is lying. And it's a bit of a swearing contest between the two of them. And I might add both have very strong self-interest in denying knowledge. So that could develop.
Well, to that point, there are lawmakers now up on the Hill that are saying that Comey lied under oath. Take a listen.
Director Comey, have you ever been an anonymous source in news reports about matters relating to the Trump investigation or the Clinton investigation?
Never.
Have you ever authorized someone else at the FBI to be an anonymous source in news reports about the Trump investigation or the Clinton investigation?
No.
Other people within the FBI and DOJ who know that the testimony that Director Comey gave before Congress was not entirely the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
There's a lot here to unpack, Judge, but now we know that that Congress is getting access to the Comey memos as of tonight from the DOJ. There are the other development is that Rudy Giuliani is joining the legal team for the Trump legal team, the former New York mayor and friend of the president. But to go back to Rod Rosenstein telling the president before the documents really have been scrubbed that he is not, you know, a target here.
I fully agree with Chuck. He's right on the mark. Rod Rosenstein could not know what's in those documents. First of all, the documents and tapes are enough to fill a small pickup truck. Secondly, they're in an FBI vault. The prosecutors, the federal prosecutors in Manhattan, haven't seen these documents yet. But the federal prosecutors in Manhattan, when asked by Judge Wood, how do you justify seizing a lawyer's files, cited what Chuck just said, the crime-fraud exception to the attorney-client privilege rule, which basically means they had evidence that the client, Donald Trump, was engaged in either a crime or a fraud and was talking to his lawyer about it, and that conversation, or however the communication took place, is not privileged and not protected. So that's what they argued to Judge Wood. From that I conclude that Donald Trump may not have been the target of the raid, but he is a subject of it, meaning a human being that the government is investigating to see how much criminal evidence there is, just as he is a subject of Bob Mueller's investigation here in D.C.
Yeah, and two separate things. And I just want to play this last soundbite. This is the president addressing a question about whether he's going to fire Rosenstein.
There has been no collusion. They won't find any collusion. It doesn't exist. As far as the two gentlemen you told me about, they've been saying, I'm going to get rid of them for the last 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, and they're still here. So we want to get the investigation over with, done with, put it behind us.
I'm not going to talk about the investigation of possible cooperation between Americans and the Russian effort to influence our election. What you're asking me about now is, why did I say what I said when people asked me whether I thought it was possible that the Russians had derogatory information on President Trump? I think it's unlikely, but I think it's possible.
Kidding.
Pretty amazing that he has gone from them most likely having information.
And how stunned everybody was that he said that. And
yes, now he's saying it's possible but unlikely. Pretty amazing statement coming from the former director of the FBI in the context of Congress now investigating and the DOJ looking into whether there was abuse in terms of a FISA warrant being from a judge based on the false information in this dossier.
He also called Peter Strzok an excellent agent who made bad decisions.
You know, I don't know why Jim Comey is doing this, honestly. You know, he went to law school, but they don't teach the first law of holes there. The first law of holes is when you're in one, stop digging. and Comey is not burnishing his reputation by this performance on the book tour, starting with this problem where now he's in a swearing contest with his former #2. Now he's sort of slicing the bologna very thin on this possible but likely. I mean, it's unlikely but possible I colluded with Russia, and I think what this shows is what has been Comey's problem from the beginning, whether he's making this inappropriate speech about Hillary Clinton's negligence or whether he's bringing it back up again 10 days before the election. He's constantly trying to manage public perception when he would be much better off just sticking to sort of whatever the rules are and defending himself on that ground. Because once you start explaining, as we know in politics, you're losing.
Well, listen, I want to continue this conversation, make it audible here. There's more to talk about on this. We'll continue this right after the break. Well, the president is weighing in on the topic that we were just talking about here on the panel. I don't know if the TVs are on down there at Mar-a-Lago, but he tweeted just moments ago, James Comey just threw Andrew McCabe under the bus. Inspector General's report on McCabe is a disaster for both of them, getting a little lot of their own medicine. Judge, that IG report fully, we don't have an extent of all the things that they have, but we do know the McCabe part. And it is interesting that there is a cross-section here of what Comey's saying, what Lynch is saying, what McCabe is saying, and how this all factors in.
You know, Jim Comey, a graduate of the University of Chicago Law School, seems to have gotten some very basic lessons, as Chuck just pointed out. We believe he is a witness for Bob Mueller before one of the grand juries, yet he is really seriously damaging his credibility by opining on everything under the sun having to do with this, by speaking on both sides of these issues. And the president is right that he threw Andy McCabe under the bus, yet he may be a witness in a prosecution of Andy McCabe, and McCabe's lawyers will for sure play the interviews. When you question him next week, when Tapper questioned him early today or yesterday, whenever it was, and to show that to a jury. Is this man worthy of belief? Look at what he said about this last week.
Yeah, there are plenty of questions, by the way, that will be left on the table, I think, for our interview April 26th with James Comey. Here's the McCabe team response to the criminal referral today. We were advised of the referral within the past few weeks, although we believe the referral is unjustified. The standard for an IG referral is very low. We have already met with staff members from the U.S. Attorney's Office. We are confident that unless there is inappropriate pressure from high levels of the administration, the U.S. Attorney's Office will conclude that it should decline to prosecute. Well, how does that go with what Jim Jordan said in that soundbite I played earlier, where most people say, well, wait a second, what happened to Mike Flynn?
Right. It doesn't matter what the political pressure is here. This is a legal situation about the fact that, according to the Inspector General, Andrew McCabe lied under oath to FBI investigators and Inspector General investigators, which is a felony. Now, the U.S. Attorney, her name is Jessie Liu, appointed and confirmed in September of 2017 under President Trump. She's going to have to make a decision with her attorneys in her office about whether there is enough evidence to prosecute Andrew McCabe. But I find it so interesting that his indignant attitude, again, towards the rule of law in the statement that his attorney is putting out, when clearly there has been a double standard, especially when it comes to Andrew McCabe being the one who oversaw the Mike Flynn investigation, who allegedly lied and pled guilty to lying to an agent not under oath.
Quickly, Rudy Giuliani is telling reporters that he's only going to be on for a few weeks and that he's going to try to wrap up the Mueller investigation and kind of clean up the loose ends and get Mueller to wrap this thing up.
He's got superpowers. He's the one person in the world who can wrap up this investigation. But if what that means, and you heard President Trump allude to it a little bit in the press conference, he said, we want to bring this to an end. Maybe there is, honestly, some new thinking in the White House about the best approach here, that maybe if you bring in Rudy Giuliani as a whole new face to sit down with Mueller and say, okay, let's cut a deal of some kind here, well, you know, you can't rule it out, but it's a tall order.
There's plenty to talk about. A lot of developments today. Thanks for rolling with the Audible there. When we come back, the humor of Barbara Bush.